Hi, Laura. You're going to have to excuse my attire. I'm actually in the hospital right now. Yeah, my blood went kablooey and they're trying to figure out what's wrong with me. But anyway, I didn't think I had the stamina to type something out. So this is why you're getting it in video. In terms of your questions, the first thing you need to think about is education. Why get an education? And what education does, it shapes the way you think. People have biases in the way they think. And for example, my bias is MIT. And what did MIT do? Every single uh, professor at MIT taught the same way. And that's that we're taught to do conceptual thinking. And that's that everything eventually will distill down to a few basic principles. It's up to you to figure out either which principle you're going to use or how you're going to position yourself to be able to shift from one principle to another. And that we actually cover that in this course. And so, for example, W.P. Carey, when they talk about the value proposition, will give you a list of like 200 things that people value, like being able to ship it by train or something like that. What do I teach you? Three things. We only value three things. We value how does it impact us economically? How does it impact us in terms of emotion? And how useful is it to me? Like, I love the pasta fork. The pasta fork to me is one of the greatest inventions ever. But would I pay $100 for a pasta fork? No. But if you ask me to pay $10 for a pasta fork, okay, now we're talking. Anyway, that's an example of conceptual thinking. And you suddenly find out that also big problems are just a lot of small problems put together. And so a very big part of any kind of innovation is you're going to have problems you're going to have to solve. And so how do you go about doing that? Now, in terms of this class, one thing a friend of mine, it's very funny, the daughter of a friend of mine was telling a friend of mine, wow, Dr. Cho must be really smart. And she said, oh, heavens no, Stephen isn't smart. But what he does have is great guile. You know, it's like street smart versus book smart. You're either book or street. And if you got both, you're in great shape. Yeah, I'm a Jersey guy. Anyway, so being able to solve problems, being able to look at problems properly. And this is one thing, and you'll see the lecture where the traditional way of teaching entrepreneurial mindset just drives me crazy. And the reason why is how do you impact courage? How do you impact curiosity? How do you impact? And to me, it all distills down to one thing: self-efficacy. Do you see a path to success, and do you see your role in that success? However, and that's why in this course, you're going to get a whole bunch of goofy problems. And I'll have my share of fun problems, but then I'll go into more technical type problems. Actually, one of my students, Camden Ith, he was working at a mall one summer and there was a shooting taking place. I mean, people heard gunshots and everybody he worked with, including his boss, started panicking. And Camden said, wait, this is just like Dr. Cho's zombie apocalypse question. And then what did he do? He looked at the landscape, the layout of where they were. He thought about different pathways, how many people in groups, and then he organized everyone to get out of there. And then everybody said, why weren't you scared? I was so scared. And Camden said, it's just the way I was trained to think. And so, yeah, I was a very proud papa when I heard that story. Anyway, what this course also does is talk about tactics, meaning how do you execute? Because maybe you can come up with great and creative ideas, But if you don't execute, it's worth nothing. And that's one thing that drives me crazy about entrepreneurship right now. Everything is focused on ideas. And you could see there are a lot of things I don't like in the way entrepreneurship is taught. I actually have a lecture in my entrepreneurship class, The Killing of the Sacred Cows. And I take all these basically accepted tenets of entrepreneurship of how you should obey, and they're just wrong. They're just flat out wrong. For example, in a business, in order to be successful, there are three parts of your startup, and they all have to work: the product, the executive management, that formulates your strategy and actually builds a company, and your marketing. And the thing is, if you don't get all three to work, people think, oh, well, we're biased towards marketing. So if you do marketing, we'll be successful. And they end up failing horribly. And part of the reason is because they're fighting on too many fronts. And this is where it's really funny. A W.P. Carey professor said this to me. And yeah, I poke fun at W.P. Carey a lot. I'm allowed to. I've got an MBA. But anyway, he said, you cheated. And I said, what do you mean I cheated? He said, all your products that you've created were easy to market. All you have to do is deliver what you said you were going to deliver, and it's easy to market. And I never really thought about it before. But when you look at the three challenges, management and building a company is not an issue, MBA and everything else. In terms of marketing is easy because there's a very high demand and need for it. And so what's your biggest challenge? Can you pull this product off? And what's my greatest strength? Being an engineer. So don't you want to fight a battle, your greatest strength, against your biggest challenge, instead of having to fight more than one front? And so this is what I get into. I had a friend, Elle. We knew each other for 40 years. We knew each other when we were 18-year-olds. And she once said to someone, because somebody said I was smart, said, oh, good heavens, no, Steven's not smart. What he has is great guile. If you have guile, which is basically street smarts, creativity, you can basically kill the gods. And those are the people in the top 10%, the Stanford types or the Harvard types or the MIT types. That's the thing. At MIT, I got my ass kicked. I was a very average student. And then we went out into industry, and all of a sudden, you're not judged on tests and papers and things like that anymore. You're judged on solving problems and what you can create. And all of a sudden, these guys were kicking my ass. I was kicking their ass. But anyway, so TEM 200 is focused on creating a mindset of execution and also how you look at problems. And hopefully there's a more technical way of looking at things. But for example, one of the big mindsets I espouse, and I actually do it also in my data-driven decision-making class, anytime you have uncertainty, that you don't have all the answers, it's a game. What do you need to know about a game? Who are the players? What are the rules of engagement? What is the order of play? And with each move, what am I trying to do? Am I trying to further myself being closer to victory, or do I try to grab victory right there? And so every time I'm faced with something, that's the way I've always looked at it. Anyway, the third part is what TEM does is there are a lot of creative exercises. And so I tend to be more conceptual, hippy-dippy. And Professor Kennedy is actually very good in going to like business details and stuff like that, which you probably would relate to better. And then Professor Cherman, that is one tough woman. You'll find out. She goes into strategy and how you should view strategy. And so with The thing about our department is just so funny because we have 6 professors with 6 very, very different personalities. And you'll see that. And we take different approaches in how we teach our courses. But that top part, the innovation part of the stack, I am so glad you enjoy the stack and those curves because students never comment on it. And then they're like, well, they can look back at it later. The thing is, you have the 2 bottom parts of the stack, and it looks like you need the 3rd part to separate you from everything else. Also, the degree gives you a credential. But anyway, we focus on creativity, which you'll get all throughout this major. Now, in terms of your network, a lot depends. I don't know who's in your network, but you know who these people are. And what it comes down to is in terms of your career, what is it that you need to know? Oh, this is the other good thing about our major. Starting in the fall, we're rolling out a AI component in every class. Now, normally I'm not for these things, but AI is the gold rush right now. And so the people who can figure out and take advantage of it. The thing is, my fellow TEM professors are all rushing through the door. And I said, do you know who gets killed first? I said, I've been through this before. I went through it in semi, I went through it in silicon sensors, I went through it with the internet. Everybody rushes through the door and they don't know what they're doing and they all get killed. What I'm actually working on right now, and unfortunately, well, I could give it to you later. I'm trying to find the Holy Grail, and that's that Richard Feynman is considered to be America's greatest physicist. No, Einstein came from Germany. But anyway, Feynman believed that when you take something, if you know it really, really well, you should be able to explain it to anyone. And that also gets into my class storytelling, which was really hard to do online. That class did not lend itself well to online instruction. But anyway, Feynman came up with a model for subatomic particles, and he made these simple diagrams of how it works. And if you look at other researchers, they would have pages and pages and pages of math. And you would say, well, Feynman skipped over things. No, if you look at his diagram, the math is built into the diagram. That Feynman understood how to integrate something together, the math as well as the theory. And that's the holy grail of all physics. How do you put the 2 together? You might have an idea, but if you can't do the math to represent it, then nobody's really going to buy into it. Quite frankly, a lot of physics ideas fail because the math doesn't work. But anyway, Feynman made that famous quote about you could teach a 5-year-old about Fourier transforms if you really understand it well. And so with this whole AI thing, I'm thinking, okay, how can I merge AI with what I teach? And how can I fuse it together in a simple way, just like Feynman talked about? Anyway, I think I'm starting to digress here. As you can tell from my throat, I think I'm running out of range. But anyway, if you have any other questions, please ask me. Please hit me up. Professor Kiao Lane is the one who's actually in charge of the class. He uses my material. However, I pretty much back him up. So if you feel you need to talk to. So what I'm saying is, if you have a question about how the class is being conducted, talk to Professor Kiao Lane. If you want to talk about the material like you are here, feel free to talk to me. Anyway, take care.